The Duggar family is the subject of rumors, and fans are horrified by what some purported insiders are saying. These sources claim that after decades of marriage, Michelle Duggar and Jim Bob Duggar, the long-standing couple best known for their reality TV show 19 Kids and Counting, have split up. A devastating picture is painted by the story that is being circulated online. Michelle was reportedly upset when she learned that Jim Bob had fallen head over heels for another woman. According to sources, the two experienced significant stress after the disclosure, which was followed by a surge of blame, rage, and emotional detachment. Jim Bob reportedly grew enraged upon learning that Michelle had discovered the truth, and in a startling turn of events, he made the decision to file for divorce. These accusations have left longtime Duggar supporters in disbelief. Any notion of a breakup is difficult to believe because the family has always presented an image of strong religion, unity, and traditional values. Nevertheless, conjecture keeps growing. Many fans are wondering if anything has truly changed behind the scenes after noticing that Michelle hasn't been seen with Jim Bob in recent public appearances or online posts. Neither the Duggars nor any of their representatives have verified any of these statements as of yet. There's a good chance that the rumors are overblown or even untrue. However, fans are shocked, devastated, and anxious to learn the truth after learning that one of the most well-known and committed couples on reality TV may be going through a serious breakup. The truth is unknown until an official announcement is made. One thing is certain, though. The Duggar family's flawless image may be changing, and fans everywhere are eagerly awaiting what will happen next. With birthdays, weddings, new kids, and other family get-togethers, the Duggar household continued to be vibrant and active as the years passed. Everything appeared to be the same on the surface. But to those who paid careful attention, there had been a subtle shift between Jim Bob and Michelle. The warmth that used to freely flow between them started to wane. They continued to stand next to each other at family gatherings and smile for pictures, but there was a discernible emotional and physical distance between them. Once so animated and hopeful, Michelle's upbeat voice had become softer and more circumspect. Jim Bob, on the other hand, appeared preoccupied. His discussions were shorter, his laughter was less frequent, and his attention was elsewhere. Longtime fans and family members began to note that Michelle was less frequently featured in public events and family recordings. Her presence felt different when she did. Her manner was still graceful, but it was tinged with fatigue, as though she were carrying a burden no one else could see. Some claimed it was just time. After all, raising 19 kids would be emotionally taxing for anyone. Others, however, hinted that there was more going on. Some even observed that Jim Bob had started to spend more time away from home, attending longer than normal church meetings or business trips. Michelle made an effort to remain composed. Even though the days were colder and the quiet between her and Jim Bob grew heavier, she continued to cling to her faith, which had always been her anchor. She persuaded herself that every marriage had its ups and downs, prayed more frequently, and smiled when she didn't feel like it. However, she had a gut feeling that this was a change rather than merely a season. The once inseparable couple was now slowly but unmistakably moving in different directions, and it was getting harder to ignore the space between them, even though no one outside could see it yet. It began as a whisper, a faint rumor that flowed silently through the society before spreading outside of it. The origin of the story was unknown, but once it emerged, it would not go away. It was reported that Jim Bob had started dating a woman who wasn't associated with the Duggar family. It seemed to begin with amicable discussions and innocuous gatherings. However, those murmurs eventually took on a different tone. Words like infatuation, distance, and betrayal started to emerge. Michelle has always had total faith in her spouse. She had trusted his loyalty, faith, and dedication for years. However, one night when she was cleaning his office, she discovered something, a letter, a message, a remnant of something that shouldn't have been there. The details were subtle but clear. As she read, her heart thumping in her chest, her hands shaking. She was overwhelmed with a sense of silent astonishment, that sensation when everything seems unreal and the ground beneath you starts to move. She remained silent for some while. Hoping she was mistaken, she prayed. There must be another explanation. She reminded herself that perhaps it was benign, that perhaps others were exaggerating the situation. However, she had a gut feeling that the reality was more sinister than she would have liked to admit. Michelle started to alter, as those closest to the family noticed. Her smiles were shorter and her eyes were heavier. She might briefly display anguish, bewilderment, or possibly even terror when Jim Bob walked into a room. Outsiders assumed she was simply exhausted. To those who knew her well, however, something was silently rupturing within. The tale was now public knowledge that the ideal Duggar marriage might not be as ideal as it seemed, as rumors started to spread more loudly from private discussions to internet forums and anonymous sources. Michelle didn't say a thing, but her silence said louder than words could. There had been an incident, something that, despite her best efforts, she was unable to avoid seeing. Michelle bore the weight of her discovery like a silent burden for weeks. Every grin seemed contrived, every phrase deliberate. Once resonating with prayer and laughter, the walls of their house now echoed with a subdued strain that no one dared to identify. As like nothing had changed, Jim Bob walked through the house. He went to church, welcomed the children, and was as composed as he had always been. Michelle, however, saw right through it. She could tell that the man she had known was fading from her life by the distance in his eyes, the preoccupied tone in his voice, and the way he avoided looking at her when the conversations became too intimate. She finally lost the ability to suppress it one evening. Between them, the stillness had grown intolerable. Michelle entered the room where Jim Bob was sitting, his phone in his hand, his focus elsewhere, while the kids were sleeping and the home was quiet. Even though her heart was pounding, she pronounced his name steadily. "Jim Bob, we must speak." Startled, even protective, he looked up. It wasn't noisy what came next. It wasn't a bomb. It was even worse. It was subdued, silent, and painfully real. Michelle shared with him her knowledge, observations, and emotions. She requested honesty because she felt she still earned it. Jim Bob was silent for a long time. Between them, there was a thick, oppressive quiet. Confusion, wrath, and denial followed, all of which were intertwined. He maintained that it was unimportant, that she was exaggerating, and that people were distorting the facts. Michelle, however, could see the truth etched in his eyes, which would not meet hers. Tears flowed from the collision of years of love and betrayal, not from weakness. She talked about their shared faith, their vows, and the life they had created. However, Jim Bob's fury started to flare. The serenity that had characterized their marriage crumbled as his comments became defensive and his voice became harsh. There were no goodnight smiles or prayers before bed that evening. Silence, the kind that follows a storm too great to ignore, suddenly filled the house that once reverberated with harmony. Michelle realized that the life she had spent decades creating might never be the same as she lay awake till daybreak, gazing at the ceiling. Days stretched into weeks, but Jim Bob and Michelle's silence never really broke. They talked about the kids, the schedules, and the housework when they had to, but there was a profound, unsaid suffering hidden behind every word. The trust that had previously kept their marriage intact was irreparably broken. Michelle made an effort to wait. In the hope that faith would mend what had been damaged, she prayed more than before. She woke up every morning thinking the same thing. Perhaps today would be different. Perhaps Jim Bob would look at her the way he used to. Perhaps the warmth would come back. However, it never did. Rather, Jim Bob became icier. Michelle had never seen the man who had once talked about forgiveness and family togetherness now carry himself with such severity. Church gatherings, errands, and projects kept him away from home more and more, and Michelle questioned whether he would ever return. Even if they didn't comprehend, their kids could sense it. Around the dining table, there was less laughter. Michelle made an effort to speak in a lighthearted manner and to maintain stability in the house. But every day she felt the weight of grief pressing down on her heart. After yet another dispute one evening, this one short but vicious, Jim Bob shouted the words that made her freeze. His voice was harsh, decisive, and devoid of any compassion. "I can no longer do this." Michelle was unable to breathe and stood motionless, her heart racing. She realized what he meant at that very instant. The man who had once vowed to support her no matter what had made up his mind. The word that hung between them now was divorce, the very thing that they had both vowed would never occur. She didn't beg, even though tears were streaming down her face. She had sensed this moment approaching from somewhere inside. The knowledge that she already had him was what shattered her, not the prospect of losing him. Michelle sat by herself in the living room that evening while the clock ticked away in the distance. The smiling people in the pictures on the wall, moments from a life that now seemed to belong to someone else, stared back at her. In that one intolerable stillness, all she had created and everything she had believed in seemed to fall apart. Once the center of a picture-perfect household, the woman now stood in the wreckage of a relationship she believed would last forever. The next few days were slow, ponderous, and strangely silent. Once alive with laughing, footsteps, and children's conversation, the house now felt empty. Michelle went through it as if she were a ghost, completing her tasks but feeling as if time had stopped. Although Jim Bob was still present, he had already left in spirit. His presence was brief, his words short. He steered clear of her gaze and conversation. If he prayed at all, the man who used to pray next to her now prayed by himself. Michelle felt completely alone for the first time in her life. As the head of a family that the world previously admired, she had centered her whole identity around her roles as a wife and mother. She didn't know who she was without that role, which was suddenly vanishing. Already, rumors had started to circulate outside their house. When she entered a room, friends became silent. The neighbors murmured. Fans began to wonder online why Michelle wasn't showing up in recent family pictures, why her grin had changed, and why her name wasn't included in posts. The rumors were only stoked by the Duggar family's silence. Every seemingly insignificant event, a misplaced ring, a mysterious quotation, a family get-together without both parents present, became evidence to others that something was seriously off. Michelle didn't answer. She was unable to. Now words had no meaning. Her throat constricted each time she considered speaking in front of an audience. What was she going to say? That behind closed doors, the idyllic existence that everyone had witnessed for years was collapsing? That her marriage had not been maintained by her faith alone? Michelle prayed at the window at night when the house was dark and the kids were asleep, asking for strength rather than Jim Bob's return. She prayed for clarity, serenity, and the bravery to confront a world that would never again view her in the same light. The last of the summer heat was blown away by the fall breeze that blew through the trees outside. Michelle experienced something similar on the inside, a silent acceptance that the life she had known was no longer there. For the first time, the true tale was being told, one of heartbreak, stillness, and the gradual, agonizing process of letting go, rather than one of perfection or control. Even though the cameras had long since stopped filming, the Duggar family's meticulously cultivated image started to show symptoms of stress as the weeks stretched into months. Online forums, fan speculation, and social media discussion only intensified, scrutinizing every photo, every public appearance, and every fleeting glance. It appeared that there were now visible fissures in the picture-perfect household. The days of silent agony were gradually giving way to introspection for Michelle. She walked through the garden, cared for her kids, and silently reflected on her life for hours on end. She started to have doubts about who she was, what she had done, and what kind of legacy she really wanted to leave. Michelle had always been viewed by the public as a loving wife and mother who valued her faith above all else. However, she was suddenly realizing that her existence might be more than just a mirror image of someone else's. Through her own fortitude, tenacity, and unshakable dedication to her kids, she could redefine herself rather than through the prism of a failed marriage. Even yet, the specter of public opinion hung over her as she embraced this new identity. Fans argued continuously, with some expressing disbelief, some passing judgment, and some expressing pity. Every online post, every whispered rumor, and every sidelong glance at family get-togethers became material for conjecture. The world now felt entitled to follow Michelle's personal path, and yet she continued. She prayed for clarity, bravery, and direction. She gradually restored her sense of calm while concentrating on the things she could manage, such as her kids, her house, and her beliefs. The lady who had previously found her entire identity in marriage was starting to realize that she was capable of being strong and loving on her own. Long seen as untouchable, the Duggars' legacy was now under scrutiny, not only for Jim Bob, but also for Michelle. What would she do in a world that had been observing her for decades? In the face of the whispers and the scrutiny, how would she alter her story? The answers were unknown at the time. Her life's previously seemingly unchanging chapters were now open, brimming with promise, uncertainty, and the potential for something quite different. In the quiet moments, Michelle came to the most important realization. With courage and faith as her compass, life may still be rebuilt piece by piece, day by day, even if it collapses as she had feared. Even if the nights became quieter and the days longer, Michelle saw every moment as a chance for introspection and personal development. The first shock of loss and betrayal had started to fade into something more realistic. A resolve to take back her life as a woman defined by her own power, rather than as a wife defined by her husband. She began modestly. Prayer and meditation started the mornings, not only for direction, but also for clarity. Gradually, she gave herself permission to name the grief, feel it, and then let it go. Every tear shed was a release, a purification of years of repressing uncertainty, anxiety, and silent grief rather than a sign of defeat. Michelle turned to her kids for comfort, and they helped her get through the emotional storm. She dedicated her life to their happiness, teaching them not only discipline and faith, but also compassion, fortitude, and the ability to face life's challenges with grace. She learned in those moments that parenting on its own might bring her a great deal of fulfillment and meaning. The outside world continued to be inquisitive and occasionally cruel. Strangers analyzed every post and appearance on social media, which was a hive of speculation. But Michelle's concern for the outer world started to wane. She gradually entered a life of peaceful independence, making her own decisions and letting herself be viewed as a woman who had persevered, survived, and developed strength rather than as the embodiment of the ideal marriage. New interests, routines, and friendships surfaced. She rediscovered aspects of herself that had been suppressed by years of social pressure. Everyday activities like volunteering, journaling, and art became a part of a life that was being meticulously and purposefully rewoven. Above all, Michelle came to the realization that she was not defined by the past, the betrayal, the heartache, the rumors. After surviving the storm, she stood on the other side with a fresh perspective. She had the power to control her life and safeguard her happiness. Her legacy was no longer merely the tale of a reality TV family. Rather, it was the tale of a woman who endured unspeakable suffering and came out full, strong, and unapologetic. Michelle's trip had become her own, despite the world's observation and conjecture. And she discovered strength, independence, and an unwavering, serene serenity in that possession. The world started to notice Michelle as she slowly rebuilt her life. After years of following the Duggar family, fans began to see minor changes, imperceptible changes in her manner, tiny peaks in images, and the strength in her eyes that had previously seemed diminished by sadness. Admiration, pity, and conjecture were the public's reactions. Some praised her bravery, saying she had regained her independence and refused to let scandal or treachery define her. Every choice she made was scrutinized, condemned, or examined by others, as if her personal journey were a public show rather than a personal battle. The dynamics inside the family also changed. Youngsters who were sensitive to the long-standing tension started to notice their mother's change. They observed her quiet self-assurance, her fearless decision-making, and the way she now led the home with love and determination. They now looked to Michelle as a real-life model of resilience, whereas previously they had mainly depended on both parents to establish structure and rules. Members of the extended family also observed the shift. A few cautiously approached her, uncertain of how to handle the new equilibrium between autonomy and power. As they observed the fortitude she had developed from suffering, others silently offered her support in the form of token acts of kindness. Jim Bob, however, kept his distance. Though there was little information available to the public about his personal life, rumors naturally circulated. Some questioned whether he would try to make amends, while others pondered whether he would become even more silent. But Michelle no longer let her feelings be defined by the ambiguity of his behavior. She had discovered that real power came from clinging to oneself rather than from clinging to someone else. Once hailed as the epitome of religious perfection, the Duggar family's tale was suddenly becoming far more nuanced. Appearances and conformity to social norms were no longer the only considerations. It had evolved into a tale of perseverance, development, and the redefinition of relationships in the face of adversity. The change was significant for Michelle. The woman who endured in silence was no longer her. She was a mother, a leader, and a person of quiet fortitude, a reminder that one can rise, change, and reclaim the life that was always theirs to define, even in the face of the most severe criticism. She no longer lived for the attention of others, even though they were watching. She had discovered freedom in living for herself. As time went on, Michelle experienced personal development, healing, and a revitalized sense of purpose. She accepted the life she was now building on her own terms, and the days of doubt and heartache gradually gave way to clarity. Michelle concentrated on the things that were most important to her: her faith, her kids, and the peaceful activities that fed her spirit. She instilled in her kids the values of kindness, critical thinking, pursuing their passions, and facing obstacles head-on. By doing this, she came to understand that her greatest legacy will be determined by her strength, perseverance, and the individual she impacted rather than by outward appearances, celebrity, or the flawlessness of a family portrait. Michelle thought back on her path to this point in private moments. Although the loneliness, betrayal, and grief had been agonizing, they had all given her priceless lessons. The value of respecting oneself, the necessity of setting boundaries, and the strength of believing in one's own voice. She now realized that merely surviving was insufficient. She desired to flourish. Those who knew Michelle's story were impressed by her quiet confidence as she took on new endeavors, whether they were creative, philanthropic, or personal. People started to see her as a woman who had overcome unthinkable obstacles and come out stronger, wiser, and more unwaveringly herself, not just as a mother or a former reality TV personality.